Hey everyone, today I want to talk to you about organization and planning. So, when we look at people with inattentive ADHD, we see that as a group they score worse than people without inattentive ADHD as a group on working memory, attention, and cognitive control, right? Amongst other things. So, something that's really directly impacted because of these executive functioning skills being less well developed is planning and organization. So, often people with inattentive ADHD, like yourself, will be likely to struggle with planning, likely to struggle with organization, and often likely to struggle with sticking to their plans and their organizational attempts. It can sometimes go in the other direction as well, especially with very high functioning people with inattentive ADHD. So often they develop quite elaborate planning and reminder routines that help them function really well, or at least better than they would without using a system like that. Now, when we look at research, evidence based best practice research and guidelines, what we see is that implementing such kind of quite elaborative planning and scheduling routines is actually very helpful. If people can stick to them, if people with inattentive ADHD don't give up on them, they're often very useful. They help with productivity, they help with feelings of accomplishment, etc. So they're definitely worth it. You've probably tried, at least at several occasions, to implement different planning schedules, and it's a really sensible thing to implement. So when we look at cognitive behavioral therapy research, what comes back in different CBT studies that is shown to be effective is a couple of different things. Okay, so if we look at the research evidence that's out there, right, we really see that three things are really important in terms of planning and organization. And those three things are having a master task list, having a daily task list, and using a calendar very religiously or very consistently, right? So those are the three elements that are really important: master task list, daily task list, calendar. And make sure you have access to all three of those from anywhere, right? So make sure it's either in a booklet that you carry with you everywhere, or it's on the computer, but also accessible through your phone, etc. So the first thing that has been shown to be effective is to work with a task list, like a master task list. So what we mean by that is that rather than trying to keep things in your mind, trying to not forget things, which obviously never works very well, right? Even if we don't have ADHD, we forget lots of things left and right if we try to keep everything in our mind, in our memory. But for people with inattentive ADHD, that's even more difficult, right? Because they have a shorter, kind of have a worse performing working memory, they have worse performing attention span, and in general, their executive functioning is less well developed, right, as a group. So a master task list is really handy. It's just a fancy way of saying you need to have one place, doesn't matter whether it's on paper or whether it's electronically, in what app it is electronically, that doesn't particularly matter. Whatever works best for you, I would go for that. But have one dedicated place where you jot down all the tasks that you need to do, right? So if we're talking about work, for example, jot down all the work tasks that you need to do in one place. There's no task too small, so write down big tasks, write down small tasks. The idea is just get them out of your mind, get them onto the paper, and then kind of over time you will learn to kind of provide faith or put faith in your organizational system, which will then kind of reduce your levels of stress, will reduce your levels of agitation, anxiety, etc. So really write down everything. So this needs to be something that you have accessible to you at all points in time. So for example, for me, I work with Google Calendar and Google Task List. That's available as part of Google Calendar. It's just as the name indicates, it's a list. You create a list and then you can put in as many bullet points as you want to. For each bullet points, you can put in subtasks as well, and we'll get to that later why that's important. But that's a very kind of quite basic software to use for keeping notes. You could also think about keeping a Word document as your master task list. You could have a notebook if you want to. The main thing that's important is that you should have access to whatever approach you use at any point in time. So if you use a notebook, you need to always be carrying your notebook with you, right? Everywhere at work, you carry that notebook with you. You also carry it with you at home, so that if something pops up about work-related tasks that you need to do while you're on your weekend, you just jot it down and that's it, right? Similarly with the Google task list, make sure that you have access to it on your phone and not just on your laptop, right? So if you're on an outing with the family, something pops up in your mind, you can just jot it down in a few seconds, and then kind of with practice you will learn that you can let it go then, rather than kind of it keeping circling in your mind over and over again and worrying about it, etc. The idea is get it out of your head, get it onto the paper or into the app, and then you can kind of continue with whatever you were doing at that point in time. The other angle as to why having a master task list is important is that you want to have all your tasks available in one location to you. So when you sit down at work to do your daily planning, for example, in the morning, first half an hour of the day, or maybe you do it at the end of the day, say in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, 3 to 3:30 p.m. You have all the tasks there. And of course, it's always the case that when you're in a kind of, especially in an agile work environment, that new tasks pop up continuously, right? And we need to be able to work with that. But the idea is that we plan as best as we can and put that framework in place, and then we can slot in things as they pop up, right? And rearrange that calendar as things pop up. But first, with the task list, the idea is really to have one place, have one location where we save all the work tasks that we need to do at any point in the future, right? And ideally what we do with the task list, with the master task list, is that we give them a rating as well, each of the tasks. So we can give them a rating of 1, which means it's a very urgent task, a rating of 2, which means it's not very urgent, it's moderate in urgency, and 3, which means that it's not urgent at all, right? So rating 1, 2, 3 for each of the tasks that we put on there. And we don't have to do that necessarily at the time that we put it on the master task list, right? If you're at the beach with your family and you just want to jot down the task that just popped up in your mind, if you can't think about that urgency rating off the top of your head, just leave it blank and fill that in the next time you're sitting down for your planning session. And the important thing is really to write down all of the tasks as they pop up in your mind, so you can kind of take them out of your brain onto the paper, onto the app. So the use of a master task list is really evidence-based. There are lots of research studies that show that people who use a master task list experience decreased levels of stress. They're better in planning, better in achieving their goals. And this is also specifically researched for people with inattentive ADHD, with ADHD in general as well.